welcome to another video. So today I'm going to be building a large terrarium for my grandmother in the garden. So this is the case. It was an old display case that my mom and gran painted over with some exterior paint, and then also sealed around the glass with silicone, as well as kind of lined it with some plastic, since the case is wooden, so just to kind of protect it from the moisture. And then in the bottom of the case we have these kind of plastic pallet things to help with drainage. That's just been laid in there, and it also means that we don't have to use as much gravel, because gravel will also be part of the drainage layer. So that's lined all across the bottom, and then there's also a pipe that comes out on the outside for drainage as well, so that water doesn't sit in it too much, because we don't want too much of a too much sitting water in the terrarium. So we have a pipe all along here, and the pipe also has some holes poked in so that the water can get in and it can drain out. And the case has a lid, so if it's particularly warm, we'll open up the lid. But this is quite a shady spot, so it gets some sun, but it gets shaded out quite quickly by the fence panel, and so you can just lift it up nice and easy. So I have a bunch of gravel here that I washed and let dry. I did that the day before so that it'll be all nice and dry. We got the bag from Wix. It's just a bag of gravel that I guess people would use on their driveway, so that's why I gave it a rinse, because it was a bit dirty. And for the soil mix, I'm using potting soil, some rotten wood that was collected from woods and stuff, and I broke up just using a mallet, some charcoal, which will also help with drainage and keeping the water sweet. That again, this was just some barbecue charcoal that I smashed up, and then also some leaf litter, which will just help to add a more nutritious soil mix. And that's just some dry leaves that was picked up over the autumn. And yeah, so I'm going to mix up the soil, and then we can start building the terrarium. Oh, and I forgot to mention that underneath here I've got a bunch of moss on bark, on soil, as well as some moss covered rocks over there, some liverwort and stuff in there. And you'll see that as I open things up, I've also got some sticks with lichen on it, and this was collected a few days back, and it's been sitting in these trays underneath this sheet of plastic with some water in it, just so it stays nice and moist, so that by the time I put it in the terrarium, it'll be ready to go. So you'll be able to see this stuff as I start to build the terrarium. So onto the soil. So to mix the soil, I'm following a recipe. Now I'll put up both recipes because I have a recipe that I use for my jar terrariums, but that one wasn't working out too much with this. The soil mix didn't really feel soily enough. It felt kind of dry, and it wasn't too balanced, so I kind of adapted the recipe a little bit. So I'll put the original and the adapted recipe so that you can see how I've changed things. And when it comes to doing your soil mix for your terrarium, adjust as you please. As long as it feels nice and balanced and everything, and there's not too much of something, then it's fine. And I'm using a plant pot, just a plastic plant pot, to measure everything out, because the recipe is by parts. So I use the same measuring, so everything was even and stuff. And I was mixing in the bucket at first, but I moved into an old sand pit just so I'd have enough space to mix everything well. And I ended up mixing 2 buckets of soil. So the adapted one fills a bucket, as long as you're using the same kind of size measuring bit, if you're following along. But yeah, I mixed 2 buckets so I would have enough, and I ended up using a bucket and about 3/4, 2/3 around there. So I didn't use up all, but I wanted to make sure I had enough mix so that I wouldn't run out. And then moving over to the terrarium, I'm adding a level layer of gravel what I did is I made sure that all the gaps in that like kind of plastic palette thing was filled, and then like a thin layer of gravel on top. And in the front I have the gravel a little bit higher so that when I'm watering I can water over the gravel and not over the soil, so the soil doesn't get too compacted and stuff and too dispersed. And yeah, so that's why I have that like gravel layer in the front that's a bit higher and not covered by the weed repellent fabric, which you'll see me put in a little bit. Because once I had that gravel layer, I put in the weed fabric, and the weed fabric has like its edges burnt so it doesn't fray when I was like trying to manipulate it. And then I use a few things to kind of hold it in place so that I can start putting in the soil mix. And what I did is at first I put it to like the front part of the weed blocker. And the weed blocker also, like the edges kind of come up to form a bit of a bowl so that none of the dirt gets into the gravel layer, because you don't want the dirt mixing with the gravel layer. It'll kind of get in the way of the drainage system. So yeah, I put the dirt like in the front part of the weed fabric, and so that it would have a wall of dirt to kind of give support for the weed fabric, so I can put the rest of the gravel, because the gravel layer would come up to the same layer as the dirt, kind of just over the lip of the wood from like outside. Actually the gravel layer is slightly higher than the dirt layer, but yeah, so I did that to support so I can add the rest of the gravel, and then I filled in the rest of the soil, and I put just a thin layer, and the camera died while I was filling that in, so apologies for that, but I just scooped in a bunch of dirt, leveled it out, and I didn't want too much dirt at first because one, I didn't want to run out, and two, I still had to put like the logs and stuff in, which you like saw just before I started to put in the gravel. I kind of like arranged it so I knew how I wanted it, and then when I was putting in the logs and sticks and stuff, I would kind of move some of the dirt so there's still a thin layer underneath but not too much, so it doesn't come up too high, because I didn't want it getting in the way of the lid. And then I placed them, and once I placed them, I then added a little bit more dirt to create a thicker layer for when it was time to plant. But I didn't put all the dirt in yet because I still wanted to have some dirt for when I was planting, and I'll explain when we get to that part of the video. So yeah, you can just see like my mum was helping me through quite a bit of this, and you can just see us kind of adjusting until everything sits right and looks okay. And yeah. So yeah, I think that's it for this part. Real time me will talk with you in a little bit, and we can get to the next step. So this is where we are now. I've placed all the wooden elements for like the landscape, and kind of have the gravel up, kind of banked up here for watering, and I'll explain more about that later on. And this is the top view. So what I'm going to do next is place some like large stones, and then I can start like decorating with the moss and adding plants. I have quite a few plants. Here are some of the plants here, and I'll make sure and put up on screen when I'm planting them the plant names. So, time for the rocks. So I completely forgot to turn on the camera while I was placing these rocks, but here's how they're looking. Some moss covered rocks. I really like they've just kind of brought Escape to life just by putting these few elements in. So next what I'll do is kind of just, while the plants are in their pots, I will kind of place them to see how I like their positions, and then I can start like planting them in, and like adding some landscaping maybe just before I plant them as well. So we'll see, and I'll remember to turn on the camera. So to figure out placement, as I mentioned in the video, I was just going to place the plants while they were still in the pots, just to kind of see why I wanted it. Now, like, I've kind of got like some pinky plants, bluey plants, green plants, so I wanted to spread them out so that there wasn't too much like samey colors and stuff, and so it would look nice and balanced. So I did that. And all of these plants are perennials, which means that they don't, like, annuals will die off and you'll have to replant them every year, but perennials come back. So that's why I picked perennials, so that, you know, I wouldn't have to like keep on replanting the terrarium. And I've got a bunch. I've got ferns, I've got false nettles. I will put them up on the screen as I am cleaning up the roots. So when I'm taking them out the pot, I'm getting rid of like as much dirt as I can with my hands. Quite a few of them were kind of root bound, I think the word is, which is like when the roots are kind of like filling up the pot. So I just kind of broke that up, separated the roots a little bit, and then I put them in a container of water so that like the dirt can be nice and washed off, as well as the roots can still stay wet, so that the transplanting isn't too, like, what's the word, traumatic for them. I didn't want to shock them too much, which is also why I kept them in the water. So one of the things I could have done to make it easier to plant was to cut the roots a little bit, but I didn't really want to do that. So when I was planting, I would just kind of create a bowl of dirt, a bit like when you're, say, mixing a cake or something, you're going to add the wet ingredients, kind of create like a well, and then I would place the plants in and kind of spread the roots out from like on either side, and then fill in with the dirt so that I can kind of fit the roots in, because if I just put them like straight down, they would be too high and I would have to use a lot of dirt and it would come up and kind of touch the top of the lid. So yeah, so that's what I did. So after I cleaned up all the roots, I can start planting. I had like some of the plants I had duplicates, or maybe it was just one of them. I know I definitely had like 2 sets of ferns, so I put one on like either end, and then I just kind of mixed things up. I also paid attention to what color their flowers were going to be. So like that one I'm planting, the kind of reddish leaf one has pink flowers, but then the more like violety bluey plant has well, it has violet flowers, yeah, bluey violet flowers. And then one of the false nettles has like yellow flowers, and there's another plant with a kind of darker red leaf that has yellow flowers as well. So I just kind of try to spread them out so that when they're flowering, it wouldn't be like the same, but as well some of them flower like slightly different throughout the season. So the one with the pinky leaves, that's flowering, which is really good, which means like it's a happy plant. And yeah, so as you can see, I'm just planting it, kind of just going around, adding them in slowly. Again, just creating the bowls, and once I planted everything in, again, I went in and filled in areas just to kind of bring it all up to one layer again, so that just to kind of prepare for when I was adding in the moss and other like kind of decorative stuff in there. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this section. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I've planted everything. See, this is like the front view. You can kind of see it like if you were lower. And here is the top view. So after I planted it, I like filled in any like big gaps and stuff with the soil. Now the camera did die when I was doing that, but I just literally filled in the soil, so it was nothing too interesting. I have the planting process though, so that's everything in, and now it's time for decorating. So adding moss and lichen sticks, and yeah. So I thought I would show you guys a quick close-up of some of the moss. I collected like when I showed you guys the rocks earlier in the video, now I want to just kind of cover. I have moss attached to sticks and bark, as well as moss connected to soil. And I made sure to have them all like sitting nice in the rainwater so they would stay nice and moist, like I mentioned earlier. And I also have some liverwort and some different kind of mosses that also like quite a damp environment. Oh, and liverwort isn't a moss, but it kind of grows a bit like a moss, and it likes the same kind of environment, which is why I collected it. And the lichen I didn't have sitting in any water. I just had that in a shaded area for when it's ready. It doesn't mind the moist environment, but I don't want to leave like the wood and stuff sitting in water. So yeah, so that's kind of how I had everything stored. When it came to planting, I tried to kind of have a nice mix of textures of different mosses. Some like this very kind of hairy like moss I used to fill a lot of space. I had some nice feathery moss, again that helped to fill out some space, and I had some like pin moss that I kind of put in some corners that was on bark. The liverwort I had like in the front because it likes lots of water, so I figured it would get hit by water whenever it was time to water. And yeah, oh, I do want to apologize, I don't have this whole process of me putting moss in. It was really tricky to find a good angle to kind of get where you can really see what I was doing. It was a bit tricky, but yeah, I was stepping back a lot, kind of adding, stepping back, adding, stepping back. What I did with the sticks a lot, I kind of created like a line of sticks of moss and like some lichen as well. I didn't want it to have too much abrupt finishes, so I kind of made sure like the end of the sticks was masked with like more moss or like rocks with moss and stuff. So yeah, and I will have close-ups at the end of the video so you can really see how everything looks. And I made sure to add some springtails. When I first ordered springtails, it came in some dirt, but I wanted to have them mostly on charcoal. So in the container I first had them in, I had a layer of charcoal underneath, and then the dirt on top of some weed repellent fabric so that they would move into the charcoal. So I just dumped all that dirt in there, made sure they all got in there, and I also added some woodlice and a centipede, and my mom had to collect the woodlice for me because I don't like woodlice. I really don't like the way they move. It kind of like creeps me out, but it would be healthy for the terrarium, so reluctantly I let my mom collect it for me to put them in. And you'll see when I put them in a little bit, I just kind of had them collected up in a jar to wait until I put them in the end, so I wouldn't have to like accidentally touch one while I was still working the terrarium. But I don't mind the springtails, they're too small to bother me. And yeah, and I pretty much made sure that almost every surface was covered with moss. And some of the moss I collected was a bit dry, so I kind of put that to the back to let that slowly kind of get its life back. And yeah, because I don't really like to see a lot of empty space in my terrariums. I like it to be nice and full and luscious and green, because like nature is like that. It doesn't like to have empty spaces, and especially like in the height of summer and spring and stuff when it's nice and wet. The only time you'll see like clear spaces is paths that like either humans or animals have created. So yeah, I like to have that lovely green look to it. Lots of green, moss everywhere. Yeah, and then once I did that, I made sure to brush off any like dirt that was kind of on space that I didn't want it. And then I gave it a good water with rainwater. Rainwater only. If you're making terrariums, only use rainwater or distilled water, not tap water. And then I cleaned the glass. And what I did, I kind of did an initial cleaning on the day of the build. And then the next day when I wanted to take photos, I went in with a microfiber cloth and gave the glass a good wipe so it was nice and clean. And you can see through it well. And yeah, that was it. Real time me will come and talk to you in a bit. And yeah, that's it. Right, so I'm all done. Here is the front view. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I know it's a bit tricky to kind of see through the reflection. I'll probably have some photos or like a brighter close-up. It's kind of close to evening time, so it's gotten a bit dull, and it also rained a bit, so everything's a bit wet. So I gave everything a good water. I also added some like lichen on top here. These like lichens weren't too happy when I was like storing them, so I thought I would put them in here and see if they kind of revive themselves. So everything's in. everything's looking all like full and luscious. Gave everything a really good water. And yeah, so I'm really happy with how it turned out. My gran likes it, most importantly as well. And yeah, so I added some isopods and a centipede. I'm hoping a couple millipedes might have gotten in here, though if I find any I will pop them in. I also made sure to put in the springtails as well. I might put some more in because only a few went in. It's quite a big terrarium, so I might put more in. What we'll see. Oh, and I'll close it so you can see what it looks like closed. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do give me a thumbs up and let me know what you think in the comments below. Have you ever built any terrariums? This is my biggest so far, and it's a bit of an experiment because it's outside and they're normally inside, so it'll be interesting to see how this does. And yeah, so please do subscribe if you haven't already. Click the notification bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. I upload every Friday. And I think that's it. So yep, thanks again for watching, and I will see you guys next week. Bye! Hi again, I just wanted to mention while you guys are looking at the close-ups that my jar terrariums are now available to be shipped throughout the UK. It's UK only, sadly. I won't be able to ship abroad, but if you are a UK customer, you can order a jar terrarium. I have some in stock if you're interested, and I'm also taking custom orders. So if you would like a different size jar or something like this that I built in the video, you can send me a message or an email. I will have my email in the description below, as well as you can message me on Instagram or Facebook, whichever you would like. And I'll also have a link to the jar terrariums, just if you want to read up on some information, and also like see some close-up photos of the jars as well. I will pop up a picture of the jar terrariums that are available on the screen somewhere. But yeah, I think that's it. So thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and if you're interested, please do give me an email or a message about the jar terrariums. So see you guys next week. Bye!